think we start where we left off last time. So I'm actually incredibly privileged and honored to once again be invited by Jan and Easy to just have a conversation, about the works that we see here. We had a conversation at your previous solo show, listening to the trees, and obviously this continues that, but there is a lot of development. Um, I wasn't going to do this, but there's a lot of faces in the crowd that we haven't seen in previous conversations. So where we might start is just really, really sort of briefly, what are we seeing? What are the works that we're seeing here? But most importantly, what's the trajectory that got us to this point right now?
Okay. Excuse me, I do have a different voice today. So how did I get here? I guess it's about 2018, 19. This work has been an action learning project, a little bit of science, a little bit of experimentation, and I've learnt a lot on the way. And I guess when I started out, I did a residency, an artist residency at Bilpin, big CI, and it's a place where near the Wallamai National Park, and I got to stay there, live there for 6 weeks with 5 other artists from around the world, and all of us had an engagement with nature of some sort. So there was a poet, there was a ceramicist, a painter, a few others, and some of the best things about it was dinner time, having discussions, talking about what we saw, what we did, and producing our own work. So I started looking at, I guess, my own research, but how trees work and whether or not they communicate, but also the environmental space. And I'm an advocate for climate action, but I'm a moderate greenie in that way, because I think I see the big picture, and it's I think we need some fringe action, but also I think there's more to it, and a lot of that's about the human condition and how people work, and it's not as easy as just a protest. So having been there, I started drawing with the trees and the kinetic energy and the wind movements from trees, and seeing what would happen, and really enjoyed the patterns and the discovery of that. So over, I guess, 7 years, maybe 8 years, this is a combination of gesture making by the environment and the collaboration with, I guess, a hub tree or a mother tree in a certain targeted and planned site. And there's a process to it, and it can happen over months. So we can talk a bit about that and unpack that.
Yeah, let's just keep going with that. A little bit of the process. I mean, I wasn't going to focus too much on the process, but I think we need to have an understanding of how actually you get to create the basic images in some regards, but then you sort of, you then take away into the studio and continue to work on. So if you want to talk about that early process of the collaboration, because you talk about the relationship between you and the environment as a collaboration rather than a force upon.
Yeah, well, a really interesting concept that came was the idea of the gesture being a communication between, or a different type of communication. So being a little bit of an anarchist, I was wondering, can a tree communicate? Can the environment as a personified environment, perhaps, but there's more to the environment that we know, and we're still discovering things. So what I decided to do after I mucked around with charcoal and pencil and pen and ink and things like that, I thought it would be an interesting metaphor. One of my daughters is a vet, and she has access to vet things such as saline bags, blood bags, but this is just salt water, I guess. So I'd empty those, and as a metaphor, I was having a bit of fun, but also looking at the kinetic movement of trees and the wind as a collaborator, and dropping and splattering paint, much like action painting with Jackson Pollock. And behind that too, there's a chance to meditate during the day. So what I would normally find is a mother tree or a hub tree, and we can talk about that later, because I think these works are subtly political in the sense that they are about the environment. And so I would load up some of these bags. I'd also collaborate, and I'd bring a set of probably plywood or something like that, but I would find recycled or discarded paints on different marketplaces. So I don't have a lot of range in colour a lot of the time. So I do have to make do with what I get or what I can blend. And that's part of the process as well, I guess, trying to use recycled things as part of the work. And so I would spend a day in a certain place with some sort of cultural attachments, some history, but something that I could meditate with during the day. So the branches would sway. I would also do a bit of action painting, but there would be these certain patterns that would arise on pieces of ply, marine ply usually. And so I might have 8 pieces. It might be 4 square meters, 5 square meters. It's a big day, lots of cans of synthetic polymer paint. Getting to a place is not always easy because they're heavy. Sometimes the paints would take months to dry, even though they're acrylic in nature. And you can see by the thickness and the texture on them that...
So during this time, is the plywood on site just drying, or is there a period in which you then take it home and you can continue for it to dry at home?
I said earlier that necessity is the mother of invention. I guess as an artist, I like to create a problem and try and solve it. So how do you load, say, 30 cans of paint that are still drying on wood boards that just fit in your boot and take them home? So I need them to be touch dry, which mostly they are. And I worked out this little mechanism of stacking them on top of each other, but with rocks.
Okay.
So I'll have a layer of 8 paintings in my boot. And so you're looking at 120 by 80 maybe pieces. Sometimes there's 12, sometimes there's 8. And I would go to get some gravel or wherever I could find little rocks, and I would just put them into the dry spots and then just layer one above the other, above the other, above the other. And boy, I had to wind the windows down. And so places like that I've been to, which is on this work here, I guess, Jindabyne, Wiradjuri Reserve at Wagga Wagga, Booty Booty National Park up the coast, Namadgi, which is near Canberra. So I sort of plan it, I scope it, I think, oh, this is a lovely tree. I want to get to know this tree and see what happens. And every time it's different. And nature's a big part of it in the sense that you're amazed what comes past or what might actually go into the work. Sometimes leaves, grass seeds, flowers, whatever. But also the animals that come and visit. Yep. Sometimes people too. Yeah.
So you have alluded in this section, you have alluded to a number of things that interest you and that permeate the work. And I'm hoping that in our conversation we'll be able to sort of touch on a few of those. Because I know that your work is deeply, deeply layered. There there are layers of meaning that perhaps are not imbued or communicated to the audiences, but are important to you in the process. And one thing that you have said in the past is that of all the factors that come into making the artwork for you, intent is one of the most important factors, but also intent as a political means. And I wanted to ask you more about that, about your, the intent behind these works. And again, you've sort of every time we discuss and you said, "Oh, now I'm getting political," you stop the conversation there. But I'm thinking we can explore that a little bit further today. So how does intent play in the creation of the works themselves, and how does the political aspects or your political belief system in some regards affect the decisions that you make through through the processes that you go through?
I guess most artists are explorers, and so when I say action learning project, it's something that can keep going, and I keep learning about not only about the environment and society and everything else that goes with it, but I guess politically, it's about creating something that might last the test of time, which people can come back to. And I guess in my own way of working, it's like a node, like it's an artifact that over time more and more people might see, and then actually get that same sort of story delivered and maybe think about it. I mean, what I like to do in the work is, I would say two things, but it's multi-leveled. I want to create something that still is aesthetically interesting and beautiful. I think, 70s to the 2000s, etc. It was very philosophically and aesthetically rich. And I still want to hold on to that, but I also want to create something that's quite unique and different. So I feel like I'm trying to do that while I'm researching this project. So the intent basically is to create works that people either like because they just like the colors, or they like the feel, or it's something unique and different. Or something that I was speaking to someone earlier where try and create works where people can constantly see something new or something interesting or something mysterious in it, in either a process way or symbolic way. And the environment helps me, or I help the environment create that. So the intent, I guess, is a slow burn politically. I'm not splashing paint on a Da Vinci or things like that, but I am creating things that I'm hoping is valuable in that respect, and also describing sort of our period in time. We have yet to see if we will get through climate change with all the politics in the world. And even just, I think Europe had, or at least Britain had 5 heat waves recently, unheard of.
So obviously the intent is to convey a political message without beating people over the head with the message itself. It becomes an entry point to a conversation, or a conversation starter, which is what we're having here today.
Yeah.
I mean, in that regards, also, I want to make sure that don't wait till the end for questions. If there's a burning question that you have, interrupt us, and we can jump onto it. I find that the best conversations is when we're all communicating with each other rather than just Jan and I, because we can do that every other time.
And we like to.
Don't wait until the end for questions.
Yeah.
But so obviously there's the idea that there is a political message, whether it be about the state of the environment, that you deliberately put forward through the choice of materials, reclaimed materials, through the way that you try to not affect the landscape in which you're in. So like you leave it in the same sort of way that you found it.
Yeah, definitely.
As well as the the period of time that allows you to spend within the landscape, that allows you to introspectively look at your own position within the body of work as well as your own opinions. And you hope, obviously, that's what's coming through the work in terms of the communication. And we were talking about earlier on about how the work it's always evolving, and there's a level of evolution. So listening to trees forms the core of the work that we see here, but it has evolved to some regards, and that's where perhaps works like this are a good example of that evolution. So I wanted to ask you about that. I wanted to ask you about going from listening to trees as the core of the work, and then introducing these macro elements into the picture plane.
Yeah, interesting. Probably before I talk about that part, I'm just thinking that people might not know, if I extend the last bit of our question, that I've got too many thoughts in my head at one time. When paint falls and other things, I see it as a form of communication, but I also see sometimes patterns develop in language. And so when we're looking at a macro image, this black and white sort of section of this picture here is really scaled up. I couldn't guess really, maybe 10,000 times. I'm not sure how that would work, of a small piece of ink. And I'm a little compulsive when I go through some of these drawings and I look at things that really interest me, and I thought, oh, that would be an interesting, it's like a dance, isn't it? And I feel like something that's really telling is that people have come up to me and said, oh, I really enjoyed the calligraphy. And they're so spot on, because I feel like it's the environment, it's showing you a language. Now, it might be mathematics, it might be fluid dynamics, it might be some sort of part of our reality that we don't understand yet. And so if you look at some of the drawings on that wall, you'll see some black ink marks, and you'll understand that those are similar to what that is, but blown up. So with the title of the show, Disrupted Dialogues, the core of my practice and the metaphor of the practice is that I disrupt the gestures and the natural communication that we collaborate with. I go back to the studio and then I cut it up. And that's a metaphor of the human condition, where we arrange our natural things to suit ourselves. And so it's twofold in a way, because I have the idea of a tessellate or a pixel as well involved in that, in terms of our current period as well with digital media. But that act of cutting and disruption in the drawings and the paintings is very much the symbol of, are we mindful enough? Are we cutting ourselves off from this communication? Are we delivering on what we think we should be doing? Some years ago, I had a work with waste, and it was called Imagining the Past Before It Happens. So the title itself can do your head in a bit, but it's a little bit like that. Are we thinking? Are we forward thinking? And in our current context, particularly in global politics, not all of us are. So with this one here, what I was thinking of doing, my issue or my problem to myself was, how do I represent in a different way this disruption? So I looked at materials as much as I looked at texture, as much as I looked at separation. So with this piece here called Sway, you might just notice the red line. I just needed something else to disrupt it at the end. I keep going a little bit. But ultimately, it's if you value the work, you value the work. I like to think about complexity and different temporal realities. And so, yeah, with that work, I was thinking, how do I use a macro image and relate it to other things as part of the practice? Yeah.
Which in some regards, I mean, it's a good point of the conversation to then bring back your idea of the topography of the landscape, which is in some regards duplicated or presented through the topography of the paint itself, as well as the way that the works that you then take into the studio and you cut up and you reassemble to then recreate a form of mental landscape, not a physical, figurative landscape, but a sort of a mental landscape. So the idea that the topography of the land represented across the topography of the paint, and then going into that microscopically and then highlighting that. And which then takes us again. You started to raise the point, which is the title of the show, which is disruption. Disrupting dialogues. Quite often you talk about the idea of disruption within your practice, and you started to talk about that, which ties into the work of Paul Feyerabend, and pardon my German, it's terrible.
Feyerabend.
Feyerabend.
Yeah.
My Spanish English, trying to put it in a German accent.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about how that comes across in the way that you think about the works that you're putting forward?
I guess to describe that as a philosophy, so I came across this in, I guess, philosophy of psychology, and so Feyerabend was a scientist and philosopher who, I guess, basically said that a lot of new science never comes up because of science. It comes up because of accidents or interesting combinations or things that people hadn't thought of before and things like that. So there's this anarchic sort of capacity to find things. So it's a bit of a hit and miss discovery in that sense. So I often thought, one way to describe it, I guess, is it's a bit punk in the true sense back in the 70s, anti-establishment, etc. But let's see how things work, and we'll try different things. So for me, it's not just a reaction to something else. I like to do like 3 or 4 different reactions to different things. So that's why I find the work really stimulating for me, because I can come at it at different angles. So Feyerabend is a bit like that, in the sense that this anarchic sort of experimentation is what I try and do. So I don't know what's around the corner, really. I know this work is developing more, and I really like the idea of, to disrupt things. If we look at that one, something that's black and white versus color, something that's painted in oil, that's juxtaposed by synthetic polymer, acrylic paint. Styles are different. Even in the, I guess you'd call it a ladder of different colors. To me, it sort of represents a topographical map from above, in a way. That's how I see it right now. But even that has different temporalities sort of in it, in the sense that they were different times and different days.
And different places, you were mentioning.
And different places in Australia, national parks usually. And they all have their own story that I bring just to that one picture. So there might be 8 different stories or experiences or meditations that I've had. And then back in the studio, finding something that I've enjoyed and thinking, oh, that would be nice. If we look at the picture over there, you can, for me, you can quite clearly see that it's been a slow walk by the ink to a spot where it's blotted on the paper, and it's just stood still, and it's the lower part of that, it's just ended, and all of a sudden it's just gone away again. So there's this movement. It's like a dance. And then on the left side of that, which is also an enlarged version, of the same lines to me represent like trees, branches, and looking through to the sky through trees. But everyone sees something different in them. So.
Something to say about that painting.
Yeah.
My friend was looking at that painting on the opening night, and he interpreted it as like traveling through time. So it's one branch that is full of life, and then it gets to the end of the life, becomes older, smaller, and then opposite the other way, it's being born to new life. So I wonder if that was any thought behind it, or if that's just someone's interpretation.
There's no mistakes in art.
I'm actually really glad that you mentioned time, because that was going to be where we're going to go. Because you talked about discovery and the process of discovering. There is discovery that happens within the site itself. But there's a lot of discovery that happens in the studio.
Yeah.
So the use of time as a tool for discovery, it's something that I think it's quite strong within your work. And I wanted you to talk more about that, because you deliberately slow down the creation process. I actually thought that you use power tools to create some of the things that you do, and then you said, no, I sit there and sand, like I spend hours sanding. And clearly that's a decision that you make to be able to slow down the process in some regards, rather than finding shortcuts. So do you want to talk about the process of time as it relates to the discovery that you're trying to sort of get to?
Hmm. Well, I do use power tools here and there, but I do hand sand the edges. As part of the process, I discovered I enjoy a soft edge to a cut piece than a sharp edge, and that is it can be laborious, but it can also be just meditative, sanding it. So there's that part as well, and also thinking about how you might, what you're going to create with this piece. When I do cut things, there's no real method in the sense that of measurement, and so sometimes I might have a measurement and then I just cut different pieces and I think, okay, how is this going to work? So process of time, I mean, I can spend months on one work. And I'm just thinking like this work over here, where there are sort of hidden things in it, in the sense that it's a similar concept, but it's slightly different in terms of its type of disruption. And I've gone that little bit further. I was saying to Miguel, where there's a couple of different tiles in there, if you want to call it that, in terms of like a mosaic, just to get that schema happening, just to further disrupt it a little bit. And so, yeah, I guess time, sometimes I like to do it faster. Sometimes it just can't go faster. And like I've said before, it's the engineering behind it as well that's interesting. And then, of course, because I don't have a lot of say in the colours, though I do as well blend things and like that. Once something's set, it's actually really difficult to, like, just ranging that, I think took me 3 weeks. Just in terms of, no, I don't like that. No, next day, no. And it was also the width and things. And it's about the different colors in there, the different paints that are in there. And so there's a whole range of different things. It's not an exact science. And I guess getting back to Feyerabend, it's about that discovery for me. Yeah.
So let's talk about the relationship between the works on paper and the works on board. Because obviously there are similar techniques in the way that you gain the first sort of set of images from the relationship with and the collaboration with the tree. But there's a slightly different approach when you bring it into the studio. In some regards, the works on paper have less labor attached to them in the studio. They're more, I mean, whereas the the tiles, if you want to call them that, or the tessellations, are much more significant in the panel works. They are much more discreet in the works on paper.
I think I labour over both of them. You might notice I was saying to Simon actually that some of these works are like started a long time ago but finished now. Have quite a bit of resource, because once I've enjoyed the experiment or something's coming up and it's happened or I enjoy something, I'll put it away and move on to the next one rather than put it in a frame or execute it in that respect, as a because it's the process that I really enjoy. I guess the differences are the substrates that they get on, even the types of paper, things work differently. But a lot of it is...
And that's part of the experimentation discovery that you really, really enjoy doing.
Yeah. I was saying to someone earlier that this time I was at the Namadgi Park and I had scoped this place, and it was up there, it was on the top of a hill, and the wind just started to roar, and the sailing bags were going and making their marks, and sometimes it's really still, and they sort of make their marks or just dots, like rain. It's interesting. And you can see in some of the pieces and how kinetically fast things had happened or not happened, as you can also in the drawings. And the drawing's a bit more simplified in the sense that I can pull away from a drawing so that it's just black and white, sort of, and you get to see more of a pattern or a communication in that respect. It's a little bit like music, with crotchets and quavers and things like that. And with paint as a medium dripping, it's more about flow and gravity, and it's whatever ends up on top, I guess, in some respect, is it's a different. It's a slower time. But you mentioned time before too, and I guess something that, I mean, I'd like to bring to the fore is your imagination in a way, because when I'm out there, I'm often thinking about trees that we compare ourselves to every other animal and in life, but we disregard the environment, and it's had billions and billions of years to develop before human beings. And there's an intelligence in trees that isn't the same as our brain, but there is certainly intelligence there. And this idea of time, like we measure ourselves maybe by 100 years, but a tree has 4,000 years and we're just dots. So when I'm out there and it's one day, in a forest or a bush or something like that, I often reflect on that and say, this is like a flick for this mother tree. And the reason I say mother tree is something else I'd like to mention, because it's very much part of the work. Trees communicate through chemical signals and other things through the root systems and through mycelial networks, and they can enhance and develop other saplings, but they can also hurt other trees they don't like. It's actually quite a social sort of communication. If you want to look it up, it's called the Wood Wide Web, and it's a real thing, and it's only been discovered, the last 50 years.
Maybe even less.
Have I mentioned that in the last time?
You briefly spoke about it, and then I cut you off.
Oh, so don't cut me off.
So I was holding back. I didn't want to say anything.
It's really interesting. This a scientist, I think maybe Canada or America, I can't remember her name. She got isotopes, radioactive isotopes, and she, after the bears chased her away the first day, she went back and she's like, just imagine a big black garbage bag or something. She put it over some branches and leaves of the trees, and she squirted the radioactive isotope into the leaves of this one tree, and then another isotope in another tree. And so she came back, and then she was able to measure that isotope in all these other trees. So they have a symbiotic relationship through the root system, but through fungus and other things. They share their sugars, they share other things, but they can communicate with each other. And so they were also able to determine that tree didn't like other trees and things like that. So it's actually billion years of development in terms of its intelligence, and trees weren't always here. In fact, one of the rarest things in our, I wouldn't say universe, the galaxies, is actually wood. In terms of, we're lucky on Earth, we think it's abundant, but it's actually not. So by saying that, I'm thinking, I'm in the bush, I'm collaborating with a tree, I'm thinking, this is great, and I'm enjoying it, but I can't measure up to even this tree. So, and mother trees or hub trees are the predominant ones, and they can help and share their resources with others. They can actually also hinder animals. So I wanted to say that because I think we need to study that more.
Yeah, and obviously it's integral to the way that you associate your relationship to the environment in which you're in some regards.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about this as a language, not a language that could be understood, or a language that not yet.
Maybe.
But then obviously that touches on the whole idea of the mother tree being able to communicate to some of the other species, whether or not something is happening. Which again, just because we weren't aware of it until now, doesn't mean that it wasn't happening.
Well, it's been happening for billions of years.
Happening for billions of years, and that is something that you are very, very deeply concerned about in the way that you're making the works. You're concerned about our relationship, and our impact on the environment, without being overtly political in some regards.
I think, I mean, it's a bit vogue, but I think it's always been there. I think, as you know, I'm a youth worker, I have been. And the question I often ask sometimes to challenge is, well, what's natural? Is it natural to have rainforests as they are, or is it natural to have suburbs that sprawl out? Because humans do both, I guess it's about being mindful and looking at things differently and from different perspectives. And so with this work, very much it's about different perspectives. A person who doesn't consider art as deeply as others might just go, oh, that's nice. And others might sort of look more deeply into it and think, oh, actually I can understand what he's talking about, and I can see something in that I couldn't see before. And so that metaphor of disruption, a dialogue, a communication is, I thought it was a great name for an exhibition anyway, but
I thought so too. I mean, when I was looking at the conversation that we had before, and where it could go, it felt like a real natural way for this exhibition to fit in within that, in terms of disruptive dialogues, because those are all the things that you have been talking about for a while, in terms of communication on multiple complex levels, as well as the disruption aspect of it, and the disruption as a metaphor, but as well as a disruption as a form of intent, which is again my very first question was about intent in what you're trying to do. I mean, in that regards, obviously, I wanted to bring in the light bulb work into the conversation. What was it called again?
The corporate snake.
The corporate snake. Because as I'm sitting here listening to you talk again about intent, about our relationship to the environment, about our effect as human beings on the environment, that we are destroying our environment. That work kept coming back in my head. I mean, it's a very strong, powerful work that you've. I'm not sure. Have you put that to bed, or are you still working on that with that?
It's not. It's sleeping.
It's sleeping. It's sleeping. Do you want to talk about that work a little bit, and how those two very, very different sort of practices relate to each other?
Well, again, I guess it comes back to the idea of Feyerabend in the sense of, I won't leave anything untouched. If it interests me, I might do it or play with it. So the corporate snake was an art installation in the rainforest of 25,000 fluorescent light globes. So if you can see the light globe in the roof up there, it's about 110 centimeters long. I made a snake out of them as a material. But I really enjoyed making the work. It took a couple of weeks with some friends as well. But the punchline of that work is that all those, at that time anyway, all those light globes were about $7.50 each. I think they're about $12.50 now. And they're all still working. So I use them as a dead material, but when you actually looked at the work in the Blue Mountains, you were actually staring at $185,000 worth of waste that still worked. And so it wasn't redistributed to 20,000 homes for 10 years. They could have had lights. It wasn't used in other ways. And so it was just dumped, scrapped. And I just thought about, that's just one industry with one product. How many other industries, such as food, we recycle some food, etc., but we don't as human beings. I think I might have said this story last time, and it's a great, it's a great little story. I guess it's an indigenous story in a way, but I tell it sometimes about, I guess, different philosophies, and a person might go in the outback and find 10 yams in the ground, but only needs 4, and so they'll pick 4 out and put the other 6 back, and then next season they'll come back, there'll be another 12. Except our sort of capitalist culture will just pull out all of the 10 yams, there'll be nothing to come back to, and then we'll just throw 6 out. And that's, I guess, part of that idea. So it's using a different material to express a similar thing.
Yep.
Yeah, but as part of that too, there's a really unique idea about where I've sort of fused a little bit of my management experience and psychology of the human animal and how society works and culture. And created this idea from the corporate snake, excuse me, to change companies in a way that works for them, but also protects their future. It hasn't taken off yet.
Might give you a break.
Yeah.
And what I might do is might just quickly open it to the floor. If there's any questions, make it really long so he can recover from. Yeah. And then we'll come back to you, Simon.
Oh, sorry, I didn't.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at these artworks, and I noticed that the paint itself and the drawings are quite fluid, and they move around, spin around in all different shapes, and then the cuts are very intentionally straight. And like for me, when I interpret that, it's like having a human view of something that's naturally occurring. So it's like human trying to understand what nature's saying, and the way they can understand it is like through their own perspective. That's quite like rigid. So yeah, I just wonder if you have any comments about that, and yeah, is there like the reason that you didn't follow the curves when you're cutting out the pieces and have them straight instead?
Well, part of the reason is because of the symbol of our digital world. When I did a little bit of research on the pixels actually aren't necessarily 2x2. They can be all sorts of things, 2x1, 3x4, whatever. And the Tesla as a symbol of that, looking through digital eyes as well, is part of that symbology for me. But I have mixed other more curvaceous shapes in there as well. And again, it's about that disruption of something straight and something sort of curved.
And that's a bit of a development from your previous body of work, which was more specifically about the tile, the square. Adding more sort of organic sort of shapes to it is more of a development now.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have also talked in the past about
Excuse me.
the grid as a human invention and acting as a metaphor for the interactions that or the disruptions that we do onto the landscape. I've heard you sort of talk about that as well. The grid as a metaphor.
Agreed.
Or the tessellation as a metaphor.
Well, there's a phrase out in the last few years called end stage capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a bit about that?
No. I think I'll leave you go for that one.
Well, I guess it's a bit like I'm a moderate greenie in a way. I think that's all, that's henny penny, the sky's falling in. I think there's good things about capitalism, and I think there's, difficult things about capitalism. The idea with don't pause the clause is a win-win situation sort of idea that if companies change in a certain way, they actually positively promote community as well. So I think that's it. We often, like a protest goes against the system, and we do need aspects of that so people can sit up and listen. But I look at things more holistic in the sense that from a range of different perspectives that, what would this person think about? What would this person or this group think about? And try and consider that in the engineering of resolving that issue. And I think our natural world is very similar to that. I think as we get perhaps smarter, unless AI kills us all, we do have a capacity to be mindful in terms of having both cities and landscapes that were originally natural, or even promoting that into, So I guess my earlier work, particularly a large one called Eden, was all about perspective, where if you were 25 meters away from this work and looking at it, it would look like a landscape, pixelated. But if you're up close, it just looks like another world of abstraction, and you might float in that. So it's very much about that, again, that cross-pollination of perspectives. And if you can hold more than one perspective, I think it's probably the true meaning of all this work, is can you hold more than one perspective on a subject? Because to go deeper in some of this work, I think that you need to, and if you can, that's great, and if you don't want to, that's great too. But it does allow you to enter another abstract sort of world. So
I mean, I would love to wrap it up there because that's a great sort of bookending for what. But I might just quickly go to Simon's for his one final question, or we might get a couple of other final questions.
Thanks, Miguel. John, I'm always interested in an artist's evolution in terms of how they evolve in the art practice. And I always encourage it because sometimes artists feel that if they go into a formula which is successful, they feel that they have to stick to that formula in order to continue the success. So I always encourage artists to sort of like try and break through and try and continue to evolve and look for something different. And I think with your works previously, as Miguel mentioned, you always have your, works on paper, which is sort of like inspired by abstract expressionist works. I mean, they both have the theme, on the environment, natural environment, and built environment, and so on. And then obviously you have your, painted abstract works. So I mean, to me, the underlying theme is always about the natural environment, landscape, and so on. But then, it's sort of like basically two more or less distinct series of work, works on paper, and then paintings, which are in panels. And then I noticed in this current series, you decided to combine the two. So I just want to find out your own view or thoughts on how you feel that they are related.
Well, I view my practice as an intention in terms of looking at sustainability, and not necessarily stuck to a medium or a means to get there. So it's interesting that, I mean, you're seeing there's two different series of works, but I guess they're just tangents of the same project. A little bit similar to the corporate snake, where this is more, that was more about waste. This is more about the environment, and discovering our relationship to our everyday, natural environment, but also, our architectural environment, etc. too. And some people might not be able to make the jump between seeing. I often use the tree or a mother tree as the symbol, but really what you're talking about is the actual space of the environment is more than just a tree. I might be sort of listening to the tree, but there's gravity, there's wind, there's a whole bunch of forces in that space. It's an entity that it's really hard to describe. So I feel like both the drawings and the paintings are like different hands of the same entity. I don't really see them as necessarily being different, though the mediums are different. Does that answer the question? Or yeah.
Any other questions? I'm sure Jan will be around for a little while longer anyway. You can always come up to him afterwards and ask him that dying question. I'd like to thank you, Jan, for the opportunity to delve deeper into your work, to find out more about your practice and your worldview. Thank you for the invitation to chat with you, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. I look forward to whatever it is that you're going to be doing next.
Thanks, Miguel. That's perfect.